That's not what's happening. It's a camera that follows whoever's speaking last.
Wow.
It follows this?
Carusi
Smart camera.
likes you, Carusi. That's all I could see all the time.
I didn't even know you can have such a camera.
Right.
Okay, all set.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the November 1st, 2021 Instructional Work Group meeting of the Madison Board of Education to order. There are no written registrants and there are no public appearances. And there are no meeting notes to approve at this time. So we're just moving on through. Can we get the wellness check from Dr. Esser?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I also have Wendy Smith here with me tonight as well. I will get started and she'll jump in here in a minute. In your packet, you should find a comprehensive monthly health services update. Tonight, Wendy and I will focus on vaccinations for our time with you. And I'll focus on staff vaccinations and Wendy will share our progress on student vaccinations. I wrote this update for you about 11 a.m. on Wednesday. And at that time, we had 2,638 employees who had yet to submit their vaccine status. Let me back up. The mandatory vaccination due date is today. So November 1st is the deadline that we stated that our staff, partners, and volunteers would have their vaccinations submitted for verification. So sorry, I should have said that to start. So I wanted to just note that. So staff have been doing an excellent job of submitting their vaccinations. When I provided this update, however, there were still about 2,600 employees that had yet to submit something. Since Wednesday, 1,111, ironically, staff have submitted their vaccination, and we are still waiting on about 1,500 people to submit. While I know that number is large, I'm not yet alarmed by it. As we continue to build our data dashboard, information is being added regarding job type, and we're seeing that many of these folks are substitutes or long limited term employees. That being said, as I just eyeball the list, I do see there are regular full-time staff who have not yet submitted their vaccination. So we will be working with supervisors this week very closely to determine whether people have just forgot to submit or if they actually are in fact unvaccinated so that we can continue working through the overall process. I want to just reinforce the importance of leading with humanity and making sure that we're checking all of our boxes and ensuring that we are supporting our employees to do what they need to do, particularly if they've been vaccinated and just haven't submitted. So we're going to continue to support working with supervisors this week to get that information updated into the system so that we can have an accurate number of those who are not yet in compliance with our expectation. As soon as we are able to account for all of our employees, we will begin that process of placing employees on an unpaid leave until they become vaccinated. Tomorrow, Sherry, our legal counsel, human resources, and our health services team will be meeting to review the exemption process exemptions, and staff who have submitted medical or religious exemptions will begin to get their responses as well to their request for those accommodations or that exemption itself. As a reminder, we do not have the obligation or the option for a personal conviction waiver, and the only way to be exempt is through a religious or medical exemption. At this point, we have less than 50 of those in total, which means that that would be a max of 50 people that we would be needing to monitor twice weekly testing. So just wanting to note as well for the board that the lift on this back end is going to be a lot lighter than what we anticipated that it could be in terms of being able to monitor that. So that is very good news as well. When we began this process, the Board of Ed asked how much this mandate was going to cost. I am pleased to report that to date, it has cost less than $1,000. We have 2 dedicated nursing assistants who have been verifying, a part-time nursing assistant. So 2 individuals who do not work full-time, who elected and have been doing an outstanding job of helping verify in their off hours. We don't anticipate major cost moving forward either. However, as we seek to streamline and better systematize our employee health processes, it's possible we may identify the need for efficiencies that could result in the need for more resources. But at this point, we are not anticipating major vaccination related resource needs for the staff mandate. For the student clinics, it will cost us more money as we pay our staff, and Wendy will talk about that shortly. But generally speaking, this has been a very high value and very low cost endeavor, and we're very proud of that. Let's see, I just want to make sure the other thing that I just want to note is, in addition to verifying our current employees, we are also in the process of building an infrastructure to ensure that we're verifying people as they start work here in MMSD. So noting that all employees need to have at least one dose before they begin employment. So that's just an important thing to think about. The first push is verifying current employees and then making sure we have an infrastructure moving forward. Finally, I have the opportunity to pass this on to Wendy to talk about probably what's much more exciting, and that's getting our students vaccinated. She is going to talk a bit about our differentiated strategy, and then we are available for questions when she's done.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. As Leah said, we are very excited to start thinking about and talking about vaccinating our first of all, eligible students, and I think that's where we'll break it down, talking about first our eligible students, so those students over the age of 12. We have partnered with Walmart in doing a phased approach to vaccinating those students over the age of 12, and looking at our high schools and joint high schools and middle schools for a phased approach to these vaccine events. So we actually had our first vaccine event today at East High School. We had 21 vaccinations, 6 of those being first-time students, which is really, really exciting, I think, to think about, students and anybody really getting their first-time vaccine when we've had it available in our community, readily available in our community. Is 6 is really, really exciting. And those are 6 students that, aren't going to have to be quarantined potentially, moving forward.
Wendy, can I interrupt that it was actually capital?
Yes,
it was Capital East. Just from a volume perspective, that's a much smaller site. So 6 is a big number at that site, but might not feel as big if it were East High School. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Capital High East. So thank you for that. But I think, going back to all of this lift of asking for vaccine events at high school really stemmed from the nurses and the health office staff who had noticed that during contact tracing that, there was a disproportionate amount of students, our Black students and Latino students who were not vaccinated and therefore being quarantined at higher rates. And so I think just to lift that here, that it was, those nurses and those health office staff really recognizing that this was a need and that we needed to do this for our schools. Something that's not reflected in this update is a survey that we are interested in completing for gauging interest for the vaccine events for our 5 to 11-year-olds, knowing that that is on the horizon probably next week of being finally approved. And so, just doing a survey to gauge, is there interest before or after school or on weekends for those vaccination events for that age group. And that will also help us gather preliminary data on just overall interest for that age group in just getting vaccinated, period. So as I mentioned before, working with Walmart on this phased approach, starting with Capitol High East today, working also with Capitol High West, West High School, Memorial High, and Jefferson, La Follette, and Senate, and then just continuing that phased approach, knowing that we're working with Walmart, who is been a really, really good partner thus far, very responsive and helping us do those things. And then for elementary schools, we have begun just those initial conversations with SSN Health on how we host those vaccine events in our elementary schools. I think anything else, Leah, with the student vaccine events that I missed? Any questions that anybody has?
If any board members have questions, please raise your virtual hand. Oh, there you go. Board Member Cruising.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this great update. This is just a lot of really good news, and it's so wonderful to see you successfully putting this vaccine mandate in place at a low cost. I'm just really, really grateful for this work. Thank you so much. Expressing that gratitude, I do have a question about the elementary vaccines and another question just about some wellness stuff that was in the wellness update. For the elementary vaccines, I do appreciate the virtues of doing a survey, and also, from what I've read about vaccine hesitancy, I'm wondering if doing, a survey might reflect vaccine hesitancy that could be overcome by having a clinic in a school because it's closer to home, or everybody else is doing it, or the parents are talking about it at pickups, and some parents who are nervous are convinced it's a good thing to do. Like, I'm wondering if a survey is actually going to capture the reality of the benefits of doing these clinics in schools in terms of convenience, and also in terms of peer-to-peer networking and people being able to talk to each other about their decisions around vaccinating their children. So I don't know if you can respond to that.
Chris, I think it's an outstanding question, and I appreciate you asking it. It's really it helps my brain expand some thinking here. Our intention is that this is an opportunity for us to gauge hesitancy and convenience factor. So we are actually planning to just ask the actual question of whether or not folks are planning to vaccinate their child, so that we have that data. That allows us to better have some visibility into where to concentrate our efforts around vaccination clinics versus vaccination hesitancy events, peer-to-peer networking, and differentiated strategies. So I appreciate you asking that. I think it gives us good food for thought, and it allows us, gives us an opportunity to pressure test our thinking. I see Mr. Dantzler is here from our research department. You don't need to come on, Donald, but this is just good feedback from our earlier morning conversation today, and we'll take that back to be sure that it's reflected.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And this is a really complex issue. Vaccine hesitancy is directly tied to our equity goals. And, I trust that you guys will be moving forward with this with equity in mind. So that's all good. My second question was about adult well-being. There was some information in the memo we received about, paying attention to the well-being of adults in our buildings, presumably our staff, through things like encouraging laughter and meditation, which I totally support. Laughter and meditation are good things. But I also want to highlight that I think we need to be honest and clear about stress that is affecting adults in our buildings right now. And some of that can't be overcome with personal responsibility types of approaches. If there are institutional reasons that people are feeling stressed, whether it's workload or work climate or pay, meditation is not going to solve it. So I think we need to be really honest that we also need to be looking at things we might need to change in our schools to address stress, as well as making sure people have time to laugh and meditate. So.
Thank you, Chris, for those questions, and I totally agree. Are there any other board members with any other questions? Okay, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to say thank you to Leah and to Wendy for all the work that has gone into both sides of this vaccination for our employees, and for looking forward towards the vaccinations for our students. I had a question around in the wellness report, just the mental health supports that we were talking about. Being out and visiting the schools, I mean, I'm hearing this a lot, just about the mental health needs of students overall. So in addition to the very intensive supports that you mentioned in the report, just trying to continue to work with community partners and with our schools to find a way to overall support students in their mental health. And I don't have a suggestion for what that looks like tonight, but just to sort of raise that and put that on the radar that there's a lot of students needing that at all levels, in addition to what the staff are needing. So thank you for mentioning that in the report, and just look forward to continuing that conversation with you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands. Thank you, Dr. Esser and Ms. Smith, for giving those updates.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the update on academic plan, English language learners, advanced learners, Black excellence, and I'm excited about this one, the state of the arts. Go ahead, Dr. Pryor, take it away.
All right, I'm so glad that you're excited. I'm excited as well, Meyer. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chair Pearson, for this opportunity. The team and I, we're very excited to come before you tonight to share with you the state of the arts and the academic plan update. You know, when we talk about the academic plan, it is important to know that this is a plan that consists of everything that contributes to the outcome of our 3 strategic goals. And, you know, as I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking about the instruction work groups. You know, most often when we land to this space, we tend to focus on the challenges that's associated with the work. And, you know, believe me, there are plenty of challenges to go around, and we're engaged in challenges and trying to resolve complex problems all day, every day. But unfortunately, this usually overshadows the quality work that is taking place in our schools and around our district. So tonight, we will aim to lift the excellent work that our principals, teachers, students, central office staff, all who have been involved in this great work that has been overshadowed for so long. And we want to make sure that we lift that tonight. And I just want to let you know that there's a lot of quality work that is taking place, even during this pandemic. And I should say dual pandemic. Tonight, we will try to tell a story in 3 stages. Stage one, I should say, is our current state. This is like our current reality. The second is our desired state. And the final stage is our strategies that will be needed in order to realize our desired state. You know, when we talk about the desired state, I want everyone to know that this is an ever-evolving work that will require convenings of our students or with our students, our teachers, our principals, staff, families, and our community. And I lift that to say this: we're not where we want to be yet. We're not where we desire to be. This work is forever evolving, and it's going to take a collaboration with all stakeholders in order to realize this space that we desire for every child in MMSD. So tonight, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome my colleagues to the screen to share this plan with you. So tonight I'm bringing forth Sydney Green, Kaylee Jackson, and Peter Kuzma, excuse me. Sorry, Peter Kuzma. And so they will come forth and share our state of the arts and our academic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pryor. Barb, would you please share our slide deck for tonight?
Mhm.
Thank you kindly. And we can go ahead and go to the second slide. So first, we really want to just celebrate, again, as Dr. Pryor said, all of the wonderful things that are already happening throughout our district. And we are really grateful for local artists, Artifacts, to lead a residency with our Dane County Juvenile Shelter, home students who requested an opportunity to beautify their space. space. And a major shout out to their teacher, Miss Britt, for organizing this experience. Barb, would you please share the video with the community? Thank you. There is music I don't think we're hearing, but know that it's there. Thank you, Barb. Next slide. And so again, as a Madison Metropolitan School District, again, our vision is that every child will graduate from high school ready for college, career, and community. And what that video did is it showed us all how we are centering the individual needs and requests of our students. And so our strategic framework goals are goals that shape our academic plan and shape when we need to pivot and when we're doing the right work in this dual pandemic. And so let's center ourselves in that to begin with. So goal number 1, remember, every child is on track to graduate. Thank you, Barb. Ready for college, career, community. Goal number 2, that our district is a district where every school in it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive, which was evident by that last video. And then goal number 3, of course, that African-American children and youth will excel in our schools. And so just as a reminder, back in 2015, we had over 1,600 community voices that helped us to determine the 9 competencies that we wanted to see of an MMSD graduate. And so our presentation tonight is how we continue to lift on those voices while also centering the arts, as we know that the arts are a way in which many, if not most, of our students will be able to actualize this graduate vision. And so here's our current state, right? We are in a dual pandemic. Barb, next slide. And so this is kind of, what we got going on right now in MMSD. There's a lot happening, right? We have a lot going on. We're focusing on the arts. We've got, this dual pandemic. We're focusing on Black Lives Matter. We've got a huge focus on literacy. And though it may seem as though a lot of things are going on, the positive is that we're still able to focus on excellence, learning, and collaboration. And that is something that we have continued to and continue to make the commitment to lean forward together with. And so here are some academic details on our current state. And I'm just going to lift a few because you can read the slide. But in elementary, we've had the success of adding a literacy foundations block because we know how important phonemic awareness is into to our students' overall literacy access. We're also focusing on advanced learning for all and ensuring that all of our students have access to advanced learning opportunities. In our middle schools, we've rewritten both our literacy and our social studies curriculums in order to ensure that they are representative of all of our students and all of our backgrounds. And in high schools, we're increasing our AP and early college options, as well as really having cross-collaborative teams in order to create interim assessments so that we are ensuring that we are a data-driven district. Next slide, Barb. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Miss Cindy Green.
Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here. And as Dr. Pryor and Kaylee both said, we have a lot of amazing things happening in the district, and we wanted to take the opportunity tonight to uplift a few of those things that help inform our academic plan and, more importantly, help us realize our 3 strategic goals that we have. I'm just going to highlight a few things that I think really help us realize our graduate vision, and at the secondary level, important that we're upholding what our students need in order to be successful with life after high school. In the middle of the dual pandemic, we know it's critically important that we're holding on to a few basic things that are essential for our students so that when they graduate from high school and graduate from MMSD, they are set up for success. And a few of those things that we've been able to continue and carry through during this pandemic are experiences related to early college opportunities. So we have an opportunity with the UW where many of our students take classes over at the campus, both while we were fully virtual and now that we're back face to face. We've doubled those numbers over the last 2 years in terms of students that are having access to UW for classes. In addition to that, on our campuses, we host and run a CNA classes and labs, so certified nursing assistants. So we have over 90 students that are taking advantage of earning a certified nursing assistant certificate prior to graduating high school. That literally means they're walking away with 2 degrees in hand, right? A CNA as well as a high school diploma. We've really been able to tap into that partnership right now as we're trying to cultivate and grow more CNAs in our district just to support the tracking and tracing of COVID. So it's really served a dual purpose for that. In addition to that, we have such a strong partnership with Madison College, and we've really been able to grow those opportunities for our students as well. We talk a lot about our early college STEM Academy, where we have 200 students taking classes over at Madison College full time. And those students have the ability to earn an Associate's of Science upon graduation. So another opportunity of 2 degrees in hand. And then a few more examples are students taking advantage of our Fire Academy and our EMR, Emergency Medical programs. And both of those also lead to a certificate that students can earn by the time they graduate high school. We've tripled those numbers in the last 2 years. Through this pandemic, the persistence and the intentionality of our students, our staff, and our schools, as well as our partnerships, I think has really shown what can be possible also for our future. And at this point now, I'm going to turn it over to Peter, and Peter is going to take us into what I think everyone's really excited about, which is a deep dive into the arts. Barb, you could go to the next slide.
Thank you so much. I'll go as deep as I can in the time that's allotted. There's a lot, of course, that won't be touched on, but I just want to say I'm really happy to be here to share an overview of the arts in MMSD. A big part of our focus tonight on the arts is because its outcomes align with the strategic plan so directly. We know that for many students, their arts classes are what keep them engaged and wanting to connect with school. We know that arts are social emotional learning. This is where students explore who they are and create a sense of belonging and community. We see how arts programming is often used to close academic achievement gaps because it demands critical thinking and multiple ways of knowing and literacy skills of decoding and pattern recognition and problem solving. And we know that the empowerment that the arts bring by lifting student voice is really a natural action piece for equity and our district's broader success. You can go to the next slide, please. So a broad outlay of our current opportunities in MMSD, we are really privileged to be able to say that all of our students from kindergarten through 6th grade have regular ongoing instruction in visual art and music by certified instructors, and they can begin strings as early as 5th grade. In middle school, ensemble music classes such as band and choir and orchestra are also offered. And then through these grades, through K through 8, organized theater or dance are mainly available through artist residencies or after-school clubs. But by the time students are in high school, options open further. So at our comprehensive high schools, ensemble music is joined by classes in theory and composition on modern genres like our hip hop studies classes, and visual art and theater and a few dance offerings expand into new areas. So among our 4 comprehensive high schools, there are 33 different advanced level courses in the arts. Next slide, please. We're really grateful to have an extraordinary array of community arts partners. These are the logos and symbols of just the majority of them, but just a few of them really, many of which are featured here. So among these, I just really want to call out Forward and Capital City Theaters for their Adopt a School partnership relationships with La Follette and Memorial High Schools. Madison Jazz Society's new integrated social studies pilot at Shabazz High School, and the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art's decades-long hosting of the biennial Young at Art K-12 exhibition, which I'm really happy to say is back this year after our COVID hiatus. You can go to the next slide. Another really important partnership and collaboration is our Partners in Education and Any Given Child partnership with the Kennedy Center and with the Overture Center for the Arts, which involves several other community partners as voices on that leadership team. And a real benefit of both of these relationships is that they bring not only a focus on artist residencies for students, but on teacher professional development, like our Wisconsin Arts Integration Symposium that we piloted 2 years ago and is still going strong. You can do the next slide, please. So in an effort, we're going to our present state as well now, in an effort to gauge the measure of our students' access to and engagement in arts programming, I chose to seek data and focus on 3 specific student groups who have been historically underrepresented in some of our arts programming, and that's English language learners, African American students, and students with IEPs. Now, we have a goal of working toward their enrollment in advanced level arts courses in at least the proportions that reflect their presence in the broader student population. As you can see, we've got some work to do. These are last year's data. So we were dealing with our virtual learning COVID year, but still they're not quite representative. You can go to the next slide. And this slide shows ensemble music participation. This enrollment data for advanced level art courses from last school year shows that we do have room to grow, and we definitely need to complete the process of identifying the barriers that may be preventing participation. We have identified some, though. Go ahead to the next slide. Looking at historical trends and seeking insights from some students and from teachers, we've noticed that there are a few places that we can focus right away. And so student access and retention and their sense of achievement in those classes is one. Our systems for staffing and scheduling teachers is another. And ways that we advocate for and communicate with and schedule students, as well as the barriers that they face in accessing the arts courses. Basically, we need to learn from our pockets of excellence that we have, and we have many. We want to take those pockets of excellence, though, and be able to make them systemic. We really want to be able to expand the transformative power of the arts. I'm going to hand it back to, I believe, Cindy next.
Thanks, Peter. Could you go to the next slide, please, Barb? So as Peter highlighted, and Kaylee and I both gave you just a glimpse into some of the amazing things happening in the district, we know that we're not at our desired state. And we also know that we have learned a ton of what is possible through this pandemic that we have been in, right? Even though we have been in a dual pandemic, we've been able to carry out some amazing things. Our teachers are working tirelessly. They're being innovative in their thinking. Our students are bringing voice to the table and telling us what they desire. So we know that we are not at our desired state yet. A couple other things that Peter didn't mention that I'm just going to highlight before I go to the next slide is things that like a marching band that we have at La Follette, and considering what that might look like if we offer that at all of our high schools. How exciting would that be for our students as they know that's something that they could look forward to when they get to high school? One of our projects is the recording arts studio at a Kiritoki Middle School right now through the use of our ESSER funds. What can we learn from that amazing project as well that we could figure out how to scale? So we have lots of things happening, and we need to figure out how to be more intentional about bringing all of these things to a systemic approach where we can afford these opportunities for every student. So if you could go to the next slide, Barb. So with that, we have gathered some feedback, and we internally have also discussed some things that we desire to see in the future. And we feel like now is the right time to figure out how to get to that desired state. We know we want to be more intentional about the articulation of our course sequencing. So our students are getting closer to earning more college credit. Our students are getting closer to post-secondary desires. We know we have lots of internships happening. How do we be more intentional about those types of things at the secondary level to really realize that graduate vision that Kaylee opened up with? And then we know in terms of art, as Peter and Dr. Pryor both said, we know districts that have strong arts program also have strong academics. And we know that those two things go hand in hand. So how do we think about more of an art-centric approach as a district, and really thinking about how that also centers the humanity and centers our students, and also brings in all of those community partners that Peter showed on those slides. I mean, we are resource rich in this community. So how do we bring that into our schools more intentionally so that we are creating these opportunities for every one of our MMSD students? We know that also will support social emotional learning. And we also know we've learned a lot from technology. Technology has afforded us lots of flexibility in the way we do things. So how do we hold on to that when this pandemic is finally over, and we can really take the good things that we've learned and continue to cultivate those so that we are flexible in our learning, and also bringing that technology into the spaces. And as I mentioned before, the innovation that our teachers and students bring every day to the table, how do we continue to build off of that, as well as the big ideas that we are having across the entire district. But how do we do that? So Barb, can you go to the next slide, please? We know in order to do that, we need to start doing some convenings again. We also know that our community, our students, our staff, and our family know exactly what we need to do in order to realize our three goals. And so we want to spend some time, starting probably in January is our goal, to do some convenings across the system. You'll also see as the next presentation is going to talk about the equity audit. We definitely want to take the data of what we are learning from that equity audit as part of our foundational work here. We know that all of that is going to be tied together. So we want to take those learnings. We want to definitely look at the research, what's happening across the nation, who's doing it well. How can we also learn from the think tank that Dr. Jenkins has started to convene that's really going to inform what the future of our academic and arts plan is going to look like. And then we we want to get back into a space of really gathering staff, student, and community input. What do our staff, students, and our community desire for our future state? What do they have going on right now that we want to consider scaling? And what do we need to do differently? So we really want to make sure that we gather that input. Then we want to take all of that data, obviously synthesize that, and come up with a multi-year plan that's going to really inform the future and further grow some of these pockets of excellence that we have going on. And we hope to then put pen to paper and have a plan to share probably May of 2022, which is scary to say, 2022 is right around the corner, but have something to come back in May and really look at what we've learned and where that is going to take us. Again, we know that we just gave you a glimpse of some of the great things happening, and we want to figure out how to build off of those to create a future plan that truly helps us realize our 3 goals and really has Madison be on the map as one of the districts that is doing the work and not just saying we are doing the work. So we're really excited about thinking about bringing people back together for some convenings. I am going to pause real quick to see if my colleagues, before we go, we do have one more slide that we want to share with you that we're really excited about, but I'm just going to pause real quick to see if any of my colleagues want to add anything in before we go to our final slide.
Yes, Cindy, thank you so much. And to the entire team, thank you so much for the presentation. I would like to say in closing statements, first of all, you heard a lot tonight. And you heard this team lead through the arts. We talked about the arts quite a bit, and that was intentional. You know, one of the first things that I said to the team that I lead here is that the work doesn't have to be punitive. You know, and I also say to the students, learning doesn't have to be punitive. You know, I'm forever thankful because of the arts. You know, it provided a platform for me to become a learner in a non-punitive manner. You know, we heard about the Summer Arts Academy that we're planning to host this summer to provide that opportunity to our kids. We talked about the early on, I failed to mention this, but the citywide arts showcase once this pandemic passes over. We talked about the marching band. We talked about theater for every school, theater. And that, by the way, that's a direct connection with theater and literacy. You know, when we talk about the arts, why are we lifting this so much? Is because we're really into and focusing on educating the whole child, the whole student. You know, we want to present arts in a way that all of our students become lifelong appreciators of the arts. You know, we want them to experience arts for art's sake. We want them to experience the arts by way of arts infusion as another way of learning. You know, when we talk about this idea that we have in the Madison community about what kind of community we would like to see, when we talk about Black excellence and community for all, right? You know, music and arts has always been the cornerstone for every significant period in our society. And so when we talk about humanity, what better way to foster humanity than through the arts? When we talk about social, emotional well-being of students, what better way to foster that than through the arts? I challenge you to go to our schools and see kids when they're engaging in the arts. You see the smiles on their faces, see the level of social emotional balance that they exist and exude during those moments. And also, as you will see as we close out tonight, even we want to think about arts for a career choice. And you will see that tonight. And I am certain that with the 2 major initiatives that we have in this district now, meaning literacy, early literacy and beyond, in the arts, and if we do these 2 things well, it will touch the souls of every child in this district. And you know, the wonderful thing about the arts and the wonderful thing about the focus that we have, it's inclusive of all students. Our students who are special need, our regular ed students, Our students who are perceived to be the high flyers, everyone can engage at the same rate and same speed. I've seen it, and it's a beautiful thing. And so again, I am very excited about, I would like to call it the new movement that we have in making learning non-punitive, if you will, making it something that everyone can enjoy. And I think if we continue to push the arts and continue to push literacy, we will reach that milestone that we all desire. And so when we talk about strategic goals, number 1, 2, and 3, that's what it's looked like. That's what it should look like when we educate through the arts and through literacy. I'll turn it back over to my colleagues.
Barb, could you go to the next slide, please?
And as part of this slide, I'm going to also ask Barb that you make sure that the audio for this particular video will come through. I just want to share, this is an example of student excellence where it's a live artifact that represents the voice and empowerment that we can expect from our students when they're really excelling in the arts. This is a student organized music group called You Got the Message. It's a band comprised of students from Memorial and West high schools, building community, lifting their voices, and really I'm not gonna explain more. I'm just gonna share this video with you. Go ahead and play if you would. Oh, we need audio. We need audio. Could we pause and back up? I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't know if it's a Zoom setting issue, Barb, or...
We're hearing it, Peter. You are not hearing it?
Correct.
We're all hearing it here.
Can't hear it on YouTube either, Barb.
Pardon me, you can't hear it on YouTube?
No.
It may be a moment of going into audio settings on Zoom and adjusting it so that the video is optimized. But at some point during this presentation, even if it has to wait until later, this is definitely worth pursuing. These students are fantastic.
Peter, what did you say the setting had to be on Zoom?
Pardon me. If you go to the sound settings in Zoom.
Yes.
And I think, and I don't have them to look at myself, but when you go to sharing your screen in Zoom, the sharing screen settings, there's a checkbox at the bottom, I believe, that allows you to optimize the video, sharing the video's audio, or optimizing the audio for the video that you're sharing.
So essentially reshare and select share
Yes.
audio also.
Yes, thank you, Leah.
That's helpful.
All of the Zoom things.
And if we are unable to get the audio to work tonight, that is okay, because everybody has access to this video and we are open for discussion this
They
time.
do, yeah.
Yes, in the meantime, while Barb tries to get that up, we can start doing discussion. Or would you like to wait, Peter?
I can share it right now, actually, if I'm allowed to share screen. Can you see it on the screen right now?
No, we see your books, your background.
Oh, we can see your two screens basically, I think.
Oh, how exciting. Yes, I know. Never mind. It was worth a try. We can open to discussion.
Any board members like to make a comment or like to have questions? Just raise your virtual hand, please. Board member Marilli.
Thank you so much, you all. Like we were able to watch the video. I'm gonna make sure to put it on social media and make sure that the voices of our students and their talents are shared. I wanted to share something that a personal experience. When I was in 7th grade, I wrote this novel. When I turned into my teacher, she asked me like who had helped me write, where did I come up with the idea, and I said, I don't understand even what you're asking. And then she looked at my paper and took that as an opportunity to explain plagiarism. I, tossed the paper and never turned in anything, until actually in my college years. And so when my daughter started attending school, I saw the sort of artistic ability. She played music. She was in different arts classes. She was in theater. I wanted the same thing to not happen. So I was really attentive to how she was navigating art classes. And even though she was in one of the schools that had predominantly students of color, we were still experiencing how white students' drawings were better and they got awards, and how light skin or white skin students were picked to be part of different plays. And I think that just kind of end up just roller coasting to just having this really hard relationship with things that she, with arts in general. And in a recent conversation with her, I asked her, like, at some point in high school, she ended up dropping music, and I asked her, like, why did you drop your art classes? Like, what was that for you? There were other things that were happening I'm going to share with you, but one of the way that she explained right away was like there was a lot of whiteness, right? It was a lot of whiteness in the content and the curriculum, and from elementary school all the way to high school, it was sort of this mixed bag depending on who the teachers were. The other things that I noticed her experiencing was the competitions with other with other classes. My daughter was in high school the first year that Pathways came, and I understand that, like, I think we wanted to be everything for everyone, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I wish in retrospect that we had, like, if you want to do Pathways, you can do Pathways. If you want to do dual language immersion, you can do dual language immersion. If you want to do XYZ, you can do XYZ. I don't think those have to be all in the same time, because what ended up happening is that you had to make choices, and what the choices were, the choices with the least amount of value end up being the things that supported her in her high school career, which was the arts. And then the other thing that I noticed was the middle school connection. So students that were connected in middle school with both like sports and arts were able to carry that out to high school, because then you had sort of this competitive nature in high school, and who was better and who's not better, or who was not as who didn't have the background or the years of experience. And then this whole notion as art as a competition, which to me, it's so disheartening to have this thing of where, where we're competing. And that started in kindergarten. Like as early as kindergarten, I saw like how kids were competing on their arts projects. And that felt like just counterintuitive to what we're trying to do. I really appreciate all y'all's work. I think art is extremely important and extremely overlooked in just education in general. And one of the things, and I hope that Board President Ali gets a chance to speak to this a little bit more, but I remember when her and I were in a campaign trail, and one of her priorities was art in education, and people would be asking, what about reading? And I learned through the campaign of like how arts is potentially the one subject that can be integrated every curriculum, right? And so I think that is something that, from a community perspective, that's something even for us to understand, that we're not talking about one class that's going to happen from 1 to 2, that we are talking about art in this expensive way that is immersed throughout the curriculum and experience of our students. So sorry, Ali, I was quoting you a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure that I elevate your brilliance around arts and education.
Thank you, Board Member Marilli. Board Vice President Castro, did you lowered your hand? Did you still want to go?
No.
Okay. Okay, Board President Mildred, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to thank you all for this presentation. I think it was a really important presentation for our community to hear that we're prioritizing the arts. I think that this is a matter of our young people's creative thinking and their critical thinking. And I think that the arts is the opportunity in which young people get to think for themselves. And I think that includes, you know, those areas where the arts and the humanities meet, right? So when you're talking about like Jessica Hatz's philosophy class, Arts and Ideas at East, that was one of the only classes that ever prepared me for a college course, because it was really about giving me the tools to think for myself. And I think especially for our elementary students, your creative thinking is your critical thinking. And so I guess I am hoping that Carletra, I see that you're here. I'm so glad that you're here because I really want to lean into arts at the elementary level and what we're doing to expand opportunities in early childhood. I know we're prioritizing 4K, so if Dr. Jenkins would like to speak to that, but Carletra, I would love to hear from you.
Do you want Dr. Jenkins to speak first, or you want me to go ahead?
You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We are really excited about this opportunity to be able to create or expand the arts in elementary. I think up until this point, we have had pockets of great things that have happened in elementary schools, show choirs in some schools. There have been some drumming that's happened in various schools. And so this is our opportunity to actually create some equitable opportunities for our students in all of our elementary schools. And so it's really exciting, starting from 4K all the way up to 5th grade.
And I think very specifically within this question, and Peter, I don't know if this is, should be directed at you, Dr. Pryor or Kaylee. So the three of you, and don't mind the baby sound of my background, but you know, the question about how we're going to emphasize the areas that we haven't emphasized in middle school or high school or elementary school for all students, which would be you know, the performing arts, particularly for our kids who are talented and gifted in that area, but also, you know, very specifically, I'm just going to name theater and dance as areas in which we have not created instruction. And if we're going to treat art like core curriculum, we're going to need to have an expansive relationship with opportunities in the arts. And I'm prepared as a board member to prioritize that within our budget. So I don't think that's something that we have to, for me, I think I want to be very honest with you all and say up front that I know that this is an investment. And I expect that investment to mean something in terms of expanded opportunity, including dance, including theater. And I want those opportunities to be K through 12. So I know I addressed all three of you. I see Kaylee. Yes, go for it.
Right.
I'm just dying to get into this conversation because I don't know if anybody knows this about me. But I'm a theater girl. Okay. I just am. I was brought up on theater, brought up in music, and brought up singing, and I sing today. And so I hear you, and I hear these sentiments around how theater and music and the arts can really bring you to your true life's purpose and like help you see your confidence. And through that, and Peter, I'm going to hand it off to you in just a moment, but Peter has been working alongside Dr. Sharon Alexander, our Director of Advanced Learning, particularly to expand the arts at our elementary level, because we know that it's there. And we know that there is confidence that is built through the arts, right? And there is a sense of self that is built through the arts. And so there are some really strategic moves that we're making within our elementary schools to be sure that we're expanding the arts. So Peter, I'm going to go ahead and let you just speak a little bit to that.
Thank you. And I will echo that. You know, my entire family, my immediate family, like I met them in and through the arts. You know, I met my wife on stage at Memorial High School as a high schooler. So I mean, I definitely understand that the sort of community that it builds, the relationships that it builds, the lifelong experiences that you come to be a part of with somebody in the arts as part of an ensemble. You know, any ensemble music piece, band class, for example, orchestra class, that is probably the longest term project-based learning you will ever participate in, no doubt. Some of the most, I will say though, with regard to theater, and I'm thrilled to hear you lifting that up, Board Member Muldrow, the idea that theater is a place at middle school and at high school especially where you don't just build your confidence, but it is by understanding others that you figure out who you are. It is by understanding context of history and context of situation that other people are living through, and you are needing to embody those people's experiences, that you better understand others as well as yourself. The connections that exist between social studies and literature and the spoken word and theater are enormous, but I will also say that some of the most outstanding theatrical performers, or I should say that the most outstanding theatrical artists that I've ever met had absolutely no interest in performing. The idea of the technical theater arts, using lighting, using sound, using shape and form, and being able to create that context, create that image. When I was directing theater in another lifetime years ago, one of the biggest compliments I had was one of my theater tech crew people looking at this raked platform that I had designed that I wanted to have on stage and saying, wow, someplace I actually get to use my trigonometry. And I was just like, okay, the fact that this is the place where all of the skills that we build in any of the other core content areas are actually applied in meaningful ways makes every bit of difference to the kids who are involved.
And I would just add to that, again, this is so refreshing that we don't have to come before you to try to convince you or sell you on this idea of the arts and the impact, which is refreshing. It's not happening everywhere. But also, I'm delighted to hear the articulation about vertical articulation and vertical alignment. You know, because that's one of the areas that I'm looking at now as we're pulling the layers back and by looking at all of our arts offerings. You know, it's important that we have vertical alignment. You know, it does us no good if we have theater in the middle school and don't have it at the high school or vice versa. It has to be vertical articulation all the way up. But again, I'm so excited about that. But I just want to put this out here. You know, there's tons of research about the impact of arts on student learning. And my dissertation was around it, by the way, the impact of quality music programs on students' academic achievement in the area of math and literature. And, you know, one thing that I discovered was that many of our doctors and lawyers, those professions, you know, all of them credit the arts for supporting them in being able to navigate that difficult curriculum. You know, the skill and the discipline that you get from engaging in these experiences, it gives you the level of focus that you need to concentrate and really go and dig deeper on things. And when I think about theater, this is the thing that I like most about theater. When we talk about engaging kids and our students, I should say, and text, you talk about text-based learning where they go in and they really interrogate the text to really better understand at a deep level what that character needs to express and relay. You know, it doesn't get any higher than that. And they enjoy doing it. And this is why I always say this, no matter what you engage in, you have to approach it with that spirit. And I say this all the time to the staff here. The work doesn't have to be punitive. Have fun doing what you're doing. And we have made learning punitive for kids. And if I don't do anything else in my life, the life that I have left, I want to just totally eradicate that, just interrogate it so that learning can be fun again. And if we do that, we're going to realize all the success that we ever hope for here.
I cannot thank the three of you enough, not only for the beauty of your answers, but Dr. Pryor, I think for your leadership in this in terms of alignment. I am gonna, I think, continue to stress that I think this is an area in which, you know, I'm so grateful, Carletra, that we have your leadership at our elementary school. I don't think we could have like a more loving leader for our youngest learners. And I think that the ability to support our young people's creativity is something that I'm grateful to get to charge this group of people with. And so, Kaylee, I think your enthusiasm and kind of the burst of energy you brought to the beginning of this conversation is something I'm tremendously grateful for. I want to emphasize that we have resources throughout the community when it comes to dance, that it is an area in which we can really lean on our community, because I think what I learned throughout conversations with Madison is that Madison is ready to see us prioritize the arts as core curriculum. And so you have my support, and I think you have a lot of support throughout this community in terms of this work. And it was beautiful, Dr. Pryor, to get to hear from you all this evening. Dr. Jenkins, I think we got so enthusiastic about this conversation that I want to go backwards to a question I asked about how the arts are going to be prioritized in 4K. And then that's it for my questions tonight.
Yeah, can you hear me well? Okay, well, let me just tell you, just totally excited. It's not much more to say after hearing from this group who were so enthusiastic about this opportunity. We've been talking about arts since day one, but now to get to a point where it appears it's going to be a realization in our district, and haven't given much thought to it, taking not only the short term, but the long term. When we start looking at our budget, I was so glad to hear someone mention the fact of doing this will take an investment, but the investment will pay off because of the correlations. I think when Peter started mentioning how arts can inform other subject areas, this is something that can be integrated. This is something for everyone. And I think as we're looking to move through these dual pandemics, I think to Ananda's comments about her experience, her daughter, I want to remind everybody, art brings that culture. And as we're planning to do it, we're not just doing arts, we're being intentional. Every child can be represented in the arts. And regardless of whether or not you are in theater or dance, please don't think that. Peter mentioned it. We have a stage crew. Everyone can participate at some form in the arts. And you could go on and have a lifelong career, but you don't need to necessarily have a career, you just have an appreciation for it. But when you start thinking about how art influenced literature, literacy, how it influenced mathematics, there are so many things that we could do. And we do know that students all bring different gifts, and sometimes it's drawn out in the arts. But from a social-emotional standpoint, the dual pandemics, we know that arts has been proven to give students a little bit more balance and just that intentionality around this. This isn't just something we're thinking about. Madison is a community that loves the arts, and Peter showed it up there, the different partnerships we have now. We want to expand upon that. So all the wonderful things I think have been said, but also the convenings that we're looking to do, being very intentional about bringing students and getting their voice, bringing our parents, bringing our staff, bringing our nonprofits, everyone to the table. This is something that I think here in Madison that we can put out there and we all can lean forward together. So I'll stop right there, but I'm just totally elated with this presentation tonight. And I just have to say to Board Member Pearson, she talked about in the beginning of us having an instructional meeting with this level of enthusiasm about something about learning that we all could jump on board. So I just want to say thank you to her too as well for tonight's presentation with Dr. Pryor, Mr. Kuzman, Ms. Green, and Ms. Jackson. And definitely, we know our very own Ms. Stanford, she's ready to lead the charge at the elementary level. She and Mr. Harvey, I forgot that, I'm sorry about that, Mr. Harvey, who is also a former band teacher.
Whew. Thank you for that. We'll go on to the Board Member Crucy.
Thank you. So I want to, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time rehashing what I've already heard about support for the arts. I fully support expansion of the arts and increased investment of the arts. It's the right thing to do. One of the little known facts about my life is I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Technical Theater. So I totally love that we want to represent all the kids who don't want to be on stage. So that said, tonight's presentation was broad. It was, definitely focused on the arts, and I love that we're finally having a presentation focused on that, but it was also about having an academic plan for MMSD. And we talked about going out to the community and doing some community listening sessions and bringing a plan to the board in May. And one of the things I'm grappling with is how we align the budget cycle to a community listening process that's going to bring us feedback at the end of our budget planning cycle in May. If we're genuinely going to incorporate what we're hearing from the community, I'm not sure how that's going to work, because we're going to be making decisions about how we invest tax dollars much earlier than that. We can always change a little bit, but we can't redo our whole budget in May to match what we've heard from the community. So I'm wondering how this works in terms of our budget process. How do we, if we're developing a plan in May and we're incorporating community input into our priorities, but our budget gets developed from January through June, how does that work?
Yeah, Dr. Jenkins, can you take that?
Yeah.
You're raising your hand, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I can take that. Any academic plan that we're putting forth, and as you heard, arts will be encompassed into our academic plan. But this is taking our strategic framework, all the goals that we have now, and put them on 5G. But we got to take a long view for this. Not everything that we get from the listening sessions, it's not even feasible. We have to think realistically about where we are right now with our budget, things that we're going to have to realign to be able to make some of the needs for next year. But we're talking way out to get it. I think we even mentioned having a band, high school bands at all 4 of the high schools. That's not going to happen next year. But we have a plan, and getting the voices from everyone that will lay out for us how we're going to be moving the next 3, 5, 10 years, 15 years. The whole academic plan should be taking a long view, not just a short view. So that's a great question. But please know, let's temper expectations. Everything won't happen next year with everything that we have going on.
That is a good clarification. I also hope we can get started next year.
Yeah, next year we are going to get started with some things, and just like we talked about, that's why we'll do it in chunks. We talked about the full day 4K, looking at the lower levels. We're going to have to do parts of it at a time, working together, hearing from everyone. This is a co-creation of a plan for the arts, and also engaging the community. There are resources that are plentiful in our community that we're going to have to make sure we connect. And it may mean doing schools a little bit different as we think about how we bring community partners in our schools during the day. We often thought about after, what can we do during the day?
Thank you for that. And my second question or comment is really about, again, the academic plan. And what I'm sensing is a bit of a disconnect between what comes to us in the consent agenda and what we're talking about here tonight. So when we vote on the consent agenda, we're getting pieces of a plan that I presume exists that includes things like Lexi and Achieve 3000, FastBridge, ANET, Amplify Science, all these pieces of how we're going to do instruction in MMSD that as a board, we have to vote on in a piecemeal way because we don't really know what the plan and the vision are for instruction, particularly around these investments.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like we're going to know that. Are we going to have this information going into budget votes for the coming school year? And more important than that, I'm hearing from teachers that they're just being told, you will do Achieve 3000, 20 minutes a day in your class, you're doing this, go. And again, the board has not actually heard a plan for how these screen-based personalized learning programs are part of our bigger plan for learning, how that fits with hands-on art-centered instruction. I'm just feeling a disconnect between kids on screens more doing things like Amplify Science, which is more screen-based than our past science programs, Achieve 3000, or instead of a class reading and discussing a book together, everybody's reading their own level of text on a computer. I really want to know what the vision is for instruction in MMSD so I can make good decisions about what we put in the budget and what we're voting on the consent agenda around instruction. So,
yeah. Chris, I think those are excellent questions you have. And I just want to remind us, that we have a continuation of certain things that had already started before we were trying to construct some new direction where we're going. Coming out of the last 18 months, and I think we're also trying to have to pay attention to starting something new and how you go about doing it. But some of those things, Achieve 3000, they were already here. Yes, we did expand them, but we're also going through an evaluation of what we're doing, everything in the district in terms of what we're going to have to get to a point of stop doing. Our biggest priority that has come up in terms of our early literacy program, we're going to continue to grow with that. I think the screen time is a great question. We are wrestling with how much do we need to continue with screen time in certain areas. Getting teachers' voices, getting families' voices, getting students' voices are all going to be critical during this time. But we are in the midst of coming out of the last 18 months, now going into the 2 months. We open up school in a full dual pandemic. We have not set the pace yet. So the convenings themselves will also give us an opportunity to do a continuation and reset of the things we had laid out prior to the pandemic. If you think about that, even our strategic framework, it was done in mind without having a pandemic. So now we're having to readjust, pivot as we're moving forward. So I'm quite certain as we're looking at the budget going long term, we're continuing some things right now, but it is probably my estimation that some of the things that we are doing, we are going to stop. And when you try to prioritize something that's larger to art, as the arts, as I told you when we were talking about Good to Great, the book there, when you look at page 139 to 143, it talks about you have to come up with a stop-do list. When you start prioritizing and becoming very intentional. So this is the work right now. We've read about it, we talked about it. Now it's time to do it. And we're leaning forward, our mantra this year, leaning forward together, meaning that we just can't pause because where we are right now, we have to lean into this pandemic. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I'm not the scientist behind it, but as all indications, it's not going to stop. But how do we make a way to get back, to move forward with our learning, with all the things that we need to do to give the students all the experiences that they have? That's a great question you have, but we're going to hopefully get there together as we're co-creating. Also, we still have to pay attention to where are our staff, where are our staff right now, where are our children right now, where are our families right now, as we're trying to move forward and listening to them as we're trying to pivot too. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you for that. And I want to say that putting together a stop-do list, which I assume will be happening towards the beginning of our budget cycle in the winter, really does need to be informed by a vision of where we want to go with instruction. And, it's easy for me to say, let's stop doing Achieve 3000, but maybe that's not the right choice because I haven't heard our overall vision and plan for instruction. So I feel like it's kind of a chicken or egg situation here. In order for the board to make good decisions about how we're going to shift our investments to get to this really beautiful vision that was proposed tonight for art-centered learning, we need to know ahead of, for this budget cycle, how we're starting that journey. So just want to make sure that's out there.
And I totally hear you on that, but let me just say to you, on some of the stop-do list, it won't necessarily be the vision that we're talking about. It will be also, as we're evaluating, assessing various things, we already seen that they're not giving us a return on the investment. So that's going to allow us to redirect some of those dollars. We don't need to get together and hold to talk about it, but we just need to assess and just make sure that those things are not giving us a return for our community. And then we will be stopping doing some of those, and we'll be bringing those things. So thanks for your questions.
Thank you for your question, Board Member Carusi. Board Vice President Castro.
Thank you so much. Just a quick comment that shared vision is definitely necessary, but vision statements, I think, are inherently reflexive, dynamic, and not discrete. And change as people change. I will share that I don't have a formal background in arts other than singing in my grandmother's church and being kind of a amateur hip hop nerd. And that's primarily because art in my K-12 experience was very white. And so I found arts classes to be intimidating. And so I tended to avoid them because I found them to be, so my question is, not just in art, but across the spectrum of learning, where does experiential learning fit into our academic plan, and in particular experiences that are relevant to Black and Brown children.
Thank you for that question, Peter. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, any time you've got a project or a challenge or a problem where you are trying to figure out how to get anything to work out or to change, whether you're dealing with the iterative learning in a STEAM challenge, or you are dealing with how can we get this message across to people as a group without speaking, anything like that. Experiential learning involves trying stuff out given a context. Hopefully you've got a strong instructional leader, you've got a strong teacher who can give you the materials you need or give you the context you need to try stuff out and figure stuff out. Any kind of art experience is in its essence experiential learning. The idea of an arts space or an art context being a very white context, that's something that does need to be really interrogated and identified and shifted, because art should be coming from the participant. Art should be, how does this student meet a challenge? How does this student understand something for themselves, and how can they express these ideas? Understanding how other people have created art is one thing, and understanding, art that has come before us is one thing. But as I would tell most of my students through most of my classroom experience, most of what we know about all of the cultures that have ever come before us have been because we've dug up artwork. We've uncovered artwork. We've found things out about them and communications from them that were expressed visually, or in our luckiest situations through their foods or their dance or their music. I don't know if that answered your question.
A little bit, Peter, thank you for that. I think one thing we need to consider is what offerings we have for our Black students that in the arts that are applicable and enticing to them. Jazz, band, all of that, right? Like that's what we want. And speaking from personal experience, okay, I, Savion, okay, personal story here, was not picked to be Sandy in the high school Grease musical, though I was the best singer, likely because I did not look like Sandy, right? And I could sing better than Sandy could sing, right? And so I hear you and I accept that. And I think, Ananda, I see your laughter, but like, I'm so serious. But like, that's a real thing. That is a very real thing. And I think that that is something that we just need to explore with everyone, because we're not going to do this status quo thing. That's not what we're about. What we're about is making experiences for all of our students. And that means seeing them as they are, and that even the experiences that they need, deserve, and desire. And so we're right alongside you with that.
Hey, Kaylee, can I add one thing to what you and Peter said, just specifically to Savion's question? We have so many community partners, as you heard Maya mention, you heard Ali mention, you heard Peter mention. And when you think about experiential learning opportunities, you think about the bringing guest speakers in, residents, art residents, and taking students out into the community. So I think that while, again, we have pockets of this happening, as we're thinking about our future plan, really being able to expand those experiential learning opportunities through all of our rich community partners that exist, and our rich community partners that look like our Black and Brown students, I think is going to be a piece of it. We've seen that happen at the high school level and other areas, and it's just about taking what is working really well and expanding it based on all of the rich resources we have available to us.
And I would say thank you for lifting that, Cindy. That is so important. And I was just writing down here when you posed that question, and exposure popped out to me. Exposure is extremely, extremely important. You know, as I scrub the data here, looking at the participation rate or the engagement rate of our Black and Brown students in the arts, And just being transparent, it's a little disturbing, and then, I ask myself the question, are we offering the right offerings for those students who are not engaged? What is it, right? And so, I looked at music production. I thought about the marching band. HBCU's marching band is huge. I look at it from the standpoint of students gaining scholarships, just like our athletes, to pay their way through school. And so part of it is exposing our kids to different offerings out there by way of partnering with the communities, and then making that offering available. Another thing that we have to look at too, and I just want to put this in this space, is that as I scrub the data and try to find the root cause of why students are not participating in various activities at various schools, we may even have to look at our scheduling currently, how it exists, because many of our students are forced to make a choice, and so therefore we can level the playing field there to give them that one more option, that may answer a lot of our questions as well. And so there's a lot of work to do around this. And that's why when we talk about convening, we realize that on this team that we're not going to have all the answers, but it is so much you can learn from students. As I reflect and see this picture here, Anama, and I think about our, think tank and just some of the ideas that she raised there. It was just mind blowing. And it just lets me know that we have to involve them in the front end of this thing if we're going to get it right. And like Dr. Jenkins said, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but as long as we have a strategic focus that we put together, we'll eventually realize the outcome that we all hope for.
If I could
Yeah,
add
thank you.
one more thing. Oh, pardon
Go
me.
ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add one more thing. Dr. Pryor, thank you for bringing that up. I think that as we go through high school, the elective opportunities, they're all about choices. But sometimes when choices are presented, or in some cases choices are made on students' behalf, if they are asked at any point in time to not participate, for example, in an ensemble music progression where you've got the vertical articulation, you've been learning through with this same group. Once a student has been required to remove themselves from an ensemble music course line, we currently don't have any opportunities in MMSD for students to re-enter. Once they have left the ensemble music setting, that door is slammed shut for them the way that we currently have things set up. There are a lot of electives competing for narrower and narrower slices of pie, and that's to be expected, and we offer a lot of things, and that's very good. Making sure that students have access through our systems and through our structures is another part of that puzzle.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. I will say I am not very familiar with Grease or Sandy, but if you talk to me about The Wiz or Medea production, I would be more familiar. So I think the offerings are critical, and also experiential learning and math, science, English, and language arts. I think when we talk about exposing our students to different experiences of professions, particularly our Black and Brown students, we kind of have to issue a challenge to our business community, to our professional associations, and to our civic associations to open their doors so they aren't only open to those who can afford to pay to open them, because those access to barriers are real. And then, in terms of the academic plan, I would like to see a assessment map of some sorts to map out all the assessments that we administer. Do they make sense? Do they not make sense? Which ones are required by law? Which ones are not required by law? And yeah, that concludes my comments.
And
Thank
I would
you.
say, Savion, that is something that we can provide. We could probably send to all board members for your review.
Thank you, Savion. My daughter that just came down here, she is a prime example of when you have an advanced learner who was deemed as an advanced learner in leadership, and her dancing with the dynamic badurettes. Shout out, they just got 2 trophies this weekend in a competition in Chicago. But they do majorette dance, and not the typical majorette dancing that people think of, but actually Black majorette dancing that is seen at our HBCUs. And she exhibits leadership skills in that way, and is the captain of her team. So, again, connecting arts into all the different ways, but also making sure that it is culturally relevant for our children is super duper important. And my last comment before I go on to Board Member Gomez-Schmidt is that we have community partners that are not on that list that are doing the work. And they're doing the work in the Black community, they're doing the work in the Latinx community and different communities across our city. So I would also challenge our CNI team in reaching out to those partners and getting them on that list, getting them part of, I can think of like a Black art studio that just opened. You have some folks that are doing theater for young people. And so, yes, I would love to see more of those diverse groups in that list. So that is my challenge to everyone in the CNI team. We got our work cut out for us. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Challenge accepted. Maya, challenge accepted.
Thank you, Chair Pearson. I would just like to say that I really do appreciate the enthusiasm around the arts. And I would also like to lift some enthusiasm for science alongside the arts. A lot of districts do STEAM, and that was mentioned today. I'm both a science person and an arts person. When my students were in elementary school, our school community came together, students, families, staff, and the surrounding community to create two different events, an Explore Art Night and an Explore Science Night. And these were both amazing opportunities for students to design their own projects, art projects for Art Night, obviously, and science projects for Science Night. And what was amazing about this is that these events brought out students who participated in both, and some different students who went to each event based on their interest and their passion, as well as community members who shared their expertise and their passion with students so that students could try out activities in each of these areas. So there were both artists at the Art Night and scientists at the Science Night. So I just like to put in a plug for science, because here in Madison, we have amazing resources and opportunities in both the arts and in science. And I think we can connect the two. Just to let you know, You Got the Message, which I'm still hoping we're going to see their video tonight, because they are an amazing band. Brady is a talented musician and a songwriter, so amazing creativity and in both music and I would say in literacy, just his songwriting skills. And Isaac is both an amazing musician and has presented science research in astronomy. And so these students, are amazing artists and amazing in a lot of other ways too. I guess my questions around the presentation tonight, and thank you for the presentation. I've been thinking a lot about the fact that we have these broad ideas, goals, and guidance that we keep talking about. So we have the district vision, the strategic framework goals, and the graduate vision. And then we have the sort of the detailed decision-making that Chris mentioned. And to me, somewhere in the middle is the academic plan that we're trying to create. The closest thing that I've seen at this level is our Education for Employment plan that's required by the state of Wisconsin under PI 26. And don't let Education for Employment scare you off, because it details how our larger district initiatives and requirements fit together. And so it includes our academic and career planning, which we started implementing in 2014 and reached full implementation in 2018 and 19. And all of our students in grades 6 to 12 now participate in this. It also includes a part of the plan on experiential learning that board member Castro asked about. It includes, like I said, the academic and career planning. It includes comprehensive counseling. It includes how AVID fits into all of this. And so I'm basically wondering, based on your presentation today, if this plan could be a starting point that we can add the arts and literacy into this larger overall plan that we already have and we're already required to have by the state. And I know that Cindy Green has worked on this a lot, so maybe Cindy could start commenting on that.
Hey, Chris. Yes, that's a I'm sitting here like, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think that you bring up a really good point that could be a starting point. I think we would need to decide what of that plan makes sense based on kind of DPI requirements versus what of the plan do we want to ensure we have more ownership and responsibility for. That's all I'll say at this point. I think Kaylee, Dr. Pryor, and Peter, maybe we will look into it and think about that a little further. I also still want to really make sure we go back to Dr. Jenkins' point around a multi-year plan that includes a recommitment to convenings of our community, our students, and our staff. And I don't think we've had the chance to do that quite as intentionally or quite at large over the last few years due to COVID. So I think maybe those two things together might be something to consider, but I appreciate your point about using that as a starting point. And I think we'll take that back to review. That's kind of my initial reaction to that.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy, for that response. And thank you, Chris, too, for that question. And it goes to our earlier work. And I think even when Caruza was asking about, the plan, the vision, and we think about what all has happened since 2010, right? And then 2014, that drops out. And we think about also prior to COVID, where were we with our performance then, if we're going to be using these various metric points? And I think we've heard it a number of times, going through COVID, coming out of COVID, we're hoping to come out better than what we were when we went into it. Even the 2014 plan, when you look at it and you had several years where you have data points where you can measure how well were we doing with all of our students. I think there were some good things, but yet there are some things that needed to be modified. When we're coming with this whole thought process, and I've been hearing about the art since I've been here, having to know that art makes a difference over my career. You can take exactly what you said and then interrogate it to see if there are some benefits in staying that course, because it's with the state, but then what else can we add to it to get us to where we actually need to go? This whole arts piece may also give us for the first time to recalibrate on what we're assessing. We know right now the forward exam does not, in an isolation, tell us exactly where our students are. We know that ACT doesn't in isolation tell us, but we can do yes and. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity as we begin to recalibrate with our community about what we laid out before COVID and what we need to do after COVID, because our hope, I believe, in our expectations that we have more students being successful than what we had even prior to COVID. But it's going to take all of us leaning forward together and not throwing out those things like we do have that were working well. And also go way back, which we've had some conversation about the effective school model, and just look at different things where children, particular high performing children or children of color as well, have done well. And we're going to have to be bringing that into our conversation when we do the convenings as well. So thanks for that question.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I just think this, again, might be a really good starting point because we are required to have it. And the plan that we have right now is a 5-year plan that started in 2018 and goes through 2023. And so it could sort of be a segue, and maybe, I just don't think we have to start from scratch.
No,
and so, yeah.
That's not our intent.
Okay. Great, thanks. And then I guess my last question is just about our board approved plans that we currently have. So 2 of those were mentioned tonight, the English language learning and the advanced learning, and there's also the special education plan that we've talked about before. I don't think these plans were ever brought together to give us an overall instructional model, which is what I think you're talking about more. But they were approved by the board. And so I guess my question is, how is the board still going to be involved with these plans, or how are these 3 plans going to be used going forward?
I'm going to say from everything that we're doing right now, and I cannot speak without saying we're still in the midst of a pandemic. We know more now than what we knew. Across the world, people pause on a lot of things to put together an emergency crisis plan when this all first happened. We're trying to emerge from there. But as we're emerging from it, those plans, even when you talk about in 2018, 2017, they have a year and a half of unaccounted for measurements of how we would have traditionally done it. And I think that it would just totally be unfair to put those types of measurements we had prior to COVID during the COVID time. But we're adjusting and pivoting as a staff. We begin to see also that some of those measurements that we did even have hasn't measured all of the wonderful things that's happened during COVID. I know everyone, we talk about the learning loss, but there's been a lot of learning gain, particularly us as practitioners, in terms of how we should be trying to engage our students, how we should be trying to engage our communities. We had more contact, ironically, during COVID with a lot of families that we wouldn't have normally had contact with. Now we're readjusting how we use that information to help us move forward. So I think the plans that we have in place, there's been a pause on them. We're just now, as we see the science in terms of our community's ability to participate more now, with students being in school, we're seeing that getting better for us. If you notice, by the way, thank you to all the people doing the hard work, because we're still in school. We haven't had many situations where we had to close down, or none where we've had to close a whole school down. But as we're moving forward, we're going to take into account what we have, and then we're also the conversations with our think tanks that we do the convenings. It's going to help us inform us on where we need to go in the future.
I just don't want to lose those along the way, because I think there was a lot of work with the community put into developing those plans. And I think that, again, is something that we can build off of, because we still have the work going on with English language learners. We still have those, special education students in our buildings, and those types of plans guide the work that's happening in each school building and provide that consistency and continuity that the schools are doing. So
be assured that we will pull those out and have that as a part of our data points. And the board must be involved in this the whole way. As I continue to say, we want to have the board conversation, all of us, and those will have to be approved, the plans, before they're finalized. So we're asking that we work together. And as we're co-creating this, everyone's voice lifted. We continue to stay on our journey of being an anti-racist district, and also be a district that's going to be about social justice, bringing everything to the table and lifting the voices. So you can't do that and not be about ELL students. You can't do that and not be about special needs students. And you can't do that without lifting up our goal 3, Black children and youth going to excel in our district.
Right, great. And I hope at some point we can talk about how the Black excellence works fits into there too, because that was highlighted tonight as part of the discussion and highlighted in the arts. So if we can continue to lift that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Marilli.
Thank you so much, Board Chair Pearson. Happy birthday, Adrian. Hope you enjoy your day. I wanted to I have said this before to this board, and something that I noticed when sometimes we use language that we're talking about something and we say the board needs this or the board needs that, I really hope that my colleagues use I statements when they have specific needs. I think the board does need transparency and does need communication, does need to be in this collaborative process, but we all have different ways to navigate what's being presented to us and what we wanted to elevate. So I wanted to elevate all the hearts that I saw earlier among all the artists in the space, and to say that we can say arts as a priority and not but and blah, blah, blah. We can say arts as a comprehensive body of work that can touch every aspect of instruction, every bucket of work that both staff and our students are engaged in. So I'm really excited about seeing all of that. It's one of the most beautiful meetings that I've been a part of, and I just wanted to say that, I'm just deeply excited. And I was so excited that I forgot to ask one particular question on the presentation that you had, Peter, around how I thought it was really interesting, and how different targeted groups were showing up and the different the music and different arts. I was just fascinated. If what did you learn by looking at the data, and what was some of the trends? And I'm theorizing a little bit around potentially like, is that a strong teacher that that is out there that's like, because we know those exist, and then we know that kids coming into the 6th grade, they already know to sign up for so and so teacher, and they come into 9th grade already knowing to sign up to blah 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 class. Is that what's happening? Or like, yeah, tell me more, like what came up for you as you analyzing this data? Because I couldn't draw parallels or a better understanding.
You raise a lot of really excellent questions. I was able to, as I dug into this data and as I really sort of tried to suss things out, first I wanted to say, when I took the overall data of all students who were engaged in any and all arts courses broadly at all 4 comprehensive schools, we did meet the proportionate rates of engagement if you look at all courses. The data that I showed on those 2 slides were specific to advanced level courses. So I do want to raise that up. The idea that if there's like, medals 1 and then medals 2, 3, and 4, the more base knowledge that's required as you continue through an articulated course work.
Right.
At some point, what we were finding is that the opportunity for students to continue seemed to be dropping off. Whether it's opportunity or choice to continue, I don't know. But that was one part of it. Looking at just all involvement in all arts courses, a lot of it was like, okay, well, we met the goal. Looking at the advanced level courses was where we realized that wasn't the case. And so pushing into, you were talking about the exuberant teacher that really sets the expectation of course you're going to continue, or this is a teacher that all of these students are looking forward to. That's one big part. I'm also noticing though that with regard to staffing, with regard to the opportunities for students to take courses, because teachers are available at a given middle school all day long or not. Sometimes not having the opportunity to take the courses at a lower grade level makes it very difficult for students to continue, again, because of the structure of doors shutting behind you as you have to pull out of a course offering due to the availability of that course or that teacher. So there's a lot to dig into. I also am starting to suss out issues of how does the participation rate in a given course feed into the availability of that course on the course selection cards the following year, and how does that become sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy if there's a single year where something goes badly and then all of a sudden that course isn't available to sign up for students the following year. So there's a lot to dig into, but I really appreciate you lifting that, and those are all questions that definitely need to be addressed.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Peter. And please, I would love to continue to engage into this conversation. In particular, I'm a parent that I had the same student that attended La Follette and East, and the difference between the availability of classes, the expensiveness of the course, the types of courses available, and also the availability, right? Because she would just get waitlisted often, even though she, trying to be in a ceramics class, so I'm really curious as you just informing, keeping us informed of equity issues around the ways in which that's showing up in our schools differently. The other point that I wanted to bring it back, because Savion also continued to bring it back in his own experience around the whiteness of in the ways in which we navigate art. Even, I think someone was mentioning, I think Dr. Pryor mentioned jazz, which was created by Black people. And a lot of times when we mention jazz, we think about, there's so much attachment to white artists as white performers or white white centric culture around that. So I'm excited to how we're going to unearth that, how we're going to continue to deepen our own analysis, and then how that's going to show up and hopefully like spread throughout, other content areas as well, right? I think there's so much opportunity for us to better align. I'm also excited about what does it look like for us to have theater and theater expressions for people with multiple abilities, right? With kids in the wheelchair and for deaf individuals. I think, I was engaged in the schools of restorative justice, and I remember getting asked a lot, like, is it appropriate for a deaf student to be in a class? I'm like, I don't understand this question, right? Like, yes, like it's appropriate for any student to be in this class, if they want to be in this class. But I think that was a good insight for me to learn how educators were even exploring particular courses or particular classes or particular opportunities with students. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to say, but I really appreciate this time and this content.
I'll just say that I appreciate you lifting all of that up. I've been taking copious notes on everybody's questions and comments and looking into, I think, a broader array of community partners and arts organizations is definitely one big first step. But I think that also the efforts to decenter whiteness in any and all of our classrooms, including our arts classrooms, is a big part of the process that we've been engaging in and need to continue to push into further, for sure.
Thank you for that. Before I allow Board Member Vandermeulen to go, I'm just being mindful of time. We are at 8:07. And we still have another presentation and to talk about the field trip policies. So this will be the last comment or question. Nikki, go ahead.
My question is on equity and having the same course in every school. Because my equity issue is on transportation and individuals with disabilities who may not be able to transfer schools easily, whether they be in a wheelchair, whether they need specialized transportation, and that may not be possible, which is why I think it needs to be in all four of the schools, all the programs as much as humanly possible. I think that's essential. Additionally, we have to make sure our spaces, and with the referendum it helps, will be fully accessible. And for example, and this isn't an MMSD example, a woman won a Grammy. Actually, excuse me, strike that. She won a Tony for Oklahoma in a wheelchair. There's only one problem. The stage she couldn't get up on because it wasn't wheelchair accessible and had to sit by herself in the front instead of with the cast on one of the biggest nights of her life. I don't ever want that, our students to feel that. So can we just focus on those issues as well?
Absolutely. I've been a part of our facilities planning meetings for all four of our high schools' art spaces, and that has been an ongoing, consistent consideration. Right now, we do have high school performing arts spaces that are not wheelchair or other able accessible for a lot of our students, and that is definitely something that we are attending to and very conscious of throughout. So yeah, thank you for lifting that up, for sure.
Thank you all for this amazing conversation. This was the vision that Dr. Pryor and I talked about having arts more centralized. And also I'm excited to have the presentations be a part of the conversation as well. That was something that we wanted to definitely incorporate, and not only having just policy and talking about different curriculums, but really showcasing our students, not only for us as board members, but also to the community. So we're actually highlighting the positive parts of what we do. And so I'm thankful and much gratitude to all the presenters. Dr. Hicks, your mic is live. And we are going to be moving on to the equity audit status update, and that will be done by our great Dr. McGregory.
As Barb pulls up our slides, I want to begin by
Make payment. Dr. Hicks, your mic is live.
Just ask Barb.
Yeah. All right. I want to thank Board Member Pearson, who's chairing this committee, the rest of the board members, and Dr. Jenkins for this opportunity to bring forth this update on the equity audit. I want to begin by first introducing some of the team who's working on the equity audit. You know, we're working with Dr. Gerlando Jackson from the Education Leadership and Policy Analysis Department, who's also over the internationally known WeLab. We have our research and innovation team, particularly Bree Monahan and Donald Dantzler, who are supporting the work, and also supporting the work is our communications team, specifically Tim Lamont, Jody Fiedler, and of course with Amy Knight and Liz Murfield supporting them. They've been gathering information and materials. The purpose of this presentation, and I'm hoping that Barb will pull our slides up. Yep. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an update. We'll talk about some of our purpose, our process, our progress, as well as our timeline. As we go to the next slide, we see our strategic framework goals. And what I want to point out is that these goals are in alignment with the overall premise of an equity audit. When we have the lofty and important goals, we also want to be taking our temperature, seeing how we're doing, and getting greater voice in terms of how students, staff, families, what have you, are perceiving how we're doing. As we go to the next slide, we see our core values: belonging, excellence, creativity, racial equity and social justice, voice, focus. And we really want to lift up voice throughout the process as we're surveying and talking with different members of our district and community. We're really uplifting voice, and every data point is important. Every voice is a data point that we're considering as we're going through the equity audit. As we go to the next slide, we realize that as we're working to eliminate educational gaps and accelerate learning for all students, we're looking at this audit as an important step to advance our commitment and on our journey to become an anti-racist organization. And we're really talking about focus being one of the key core values that we're honing in on as we're trying to get to our goals. How do we really focus and move forward with the equity lens? As we talk about this equity audit, I'm going to turn things over now to the R&I team who will take it from here. And so I will let them begin.
Thanks, Dr. McGregory. Barb, you can go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly share some of the data that provides a rationale for the equity audit in MMSD. MMSD has in the past participated in equity audits, but the rationale for completing an equity audit in 2021-22 remains strong. By now, we're all fairly familiar with the inequities that exist within our system that are persistent both across time and various indicators, including income, employment, education, and health outcomes. And that these inequities are typically based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, income, gender and sexuality, disability status, and language learner status. When we look just at racial and ethnic inequities, there is a lot of evidence that the state of Wisconsin has the most extreme gaps in opportunity and outcomes based on race. and that within Wisconsin, MMSD is often ranked among the worst or the worst in the state on some of these indicators. Go to the next slide. So there's no place where these inequities are more evident than in looking at some of the disparities that exist in outcomes related to MMSD's core service provision. So this graph shows forward assessment proficiency results in reading for 4th grade students by race. You can see that on average, our system sets up our white students, our more privileged students, to be more successful than the state, while we are underperforming with preparing minority students relative to the state overall, which creates those persistent gaps. And so this is a trend that persists almost universally in our system, regardless of the instrument or assessment used or the time period. So this graph shows forward results for 8th grade students on reading and tells a very similar story to the previous slide. So as Dr. McGregory mentioned a bit earlier, this equity audit is being conducted by the WE Lab, the Wisconsin Education and Inclusion Lab at UW-Madison, led by Dr. Gerlando Jackson. Dr. Jackson is the director and chief research scientist of the WE Lab. He has conducted several recent large-scale equity audits of educational organizations, including in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and Iowa State University recently. So our team at MMSD is supporting the work and assisting Dr. Jackson's team in connecting to and accessing resources within MMSD that are necessary for conducting the audit. I know Dr. Jackson was planning to join, but was not able to join this meeting this evening. But we are able as a team to relay any questions that the board has to him about the specifics of the audit. Go to the next slide, please, Barb. And then again, to sort of piggyback on what Dr. McGregory referenced, the primary goal of this project is to really tap into the expertise of UW-Madison to stimulate that focus on equity and diversity, and really live out that commitment of becoming an anti-racist organization. So completing an equity audit is one of those key pieces to getting there that will help us understand our existing equity and diversity assets and the attitudes that exist in our schools and community about those factors.
Alrighty, thank you, Dr. McGregory, and thank you, Bree, for preempting our presentation this evening. I will try to keep it as concise as possible for everyone, but we did want to highlight and show the key stakeholders that will be engaged throughout this equity audit through the various forms of data collection that we will have. So we'll have our students and families, of course, our teachers and staff. We'll engage alumni of MMSD. We'll also have important business and community partners, building leadership. We're going to talk to our district administrators as well as senior leadership will all be key stakeholders in this throughout this equity audit process. Next slide, please, Barb. So with engaging those various stakeholders that were just mentioned, we will go through several methodologies to collect data around MMSD and really analyze the veracity to which our equity practices are being shown. So we will have document analysis of current and past programs that we have related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will also provide secondary data similar to the data that Bree presented in her presentation around some of our student achievement metrics and other metrics that we'll look at for the secondary data. Individual interviews will be up. Some individuals may have received one of these individual interviews as the portal went live last week. And we'll also be conducting some focus groups. One thing it is important to note, while the R&I office is involved in this process, We definitely want to reduce the bias and things around like doing any type of analysis. So all of that will be handled by the We Lab and Dr. Jackson staff. We will just be the conduits providing the information to them and assisting with gathering the individuals for the focus groups and providing some of the contact lists for the interview and surveys that will be disseminated. Next slide, please, Bart. So just looking at the timeline, so previously I mentioned that the interview portal went live last week. So what it looks like, it's a virtual interview portal where contacts were uploaded to that virtual interview portal, and it will send out the message, and then you go into the platform and you log in and you can do the interview virtually. Starting in December, we will begin to compile the focus groups and have some of those going with in conjunction with the We Lab. By January, it is hoped that a preliminary report and a secondary data review will be have some type of report and update for you all for that. And by February, have a preliminary report of the overall equity audit. And then by March, review that preliminary final report with district leadership and make sure everything is in order and is together. And then hopefully by April, we will have a final draft of that equity audit that will be released to the public. And that concludes our presentation tonight. As Bree said, Dr. Jackson had to step away. He was in parent-teacher conferences this evening. So if you do have any questions that are specifically related to him or his lab's processes, please direct those to us and we will make sure to get them to him and provide you with the response.
Thank you for that very concise, very quick presentation. So if you can raise your virtual hands, if you have any questions. And first hand I see is Board Member Vandermeulen. Take it away.
Yes, just a suggestion on survey participants, and that also to make sure that disability groups like Bad Town Mamas, Parent Advisory Group, and some of the groups that focus on individuals with disabilities are included in either the focus groups or in the survey itself. That's my only comment.
No, thank you for that observation. We will certainly do that. All of our students will be, all of our secondary students, that is, will be interviewed through the portal. And then we will be intentionally going after groups such as the ones you mentioned for the focus group conversations.
Great.
Thank you. Board Member Murilli.
Just a couple of things. Thank you so much, Chair Pearson. First, I wanted to thank so much the team to be elevating this work and in partnership with UW. I want to also say that Dr. Jolando Jackson is the reason that is one of the people that supported me getting through school and getting my master's degree. So I have a deep appreciation for him and his work and fantastic work around the Wisconsin lab. I am just curious on how are you all thinking about bringing this information back to the board and to the community on your findings?
Well, we've already in the tentative timeline have talked about different ways that we will have preliminary reports, and we envision bringing that back to the board, the preliminary report. We also talked about different types of convenings by which we can vet things we're finding in the preliminary report with particular community groups. So that way we can have a real conversation. This needs to be a living, dynamic process and not just where we have some experts pull some data, tell us, and then be done. It needs to be a little bit more iterative and more interactive.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. McGregory. And I was specifically also back to something that Board Member Carusi brought up around the alignment with budget implications and also budget decision making. So that's why I'm bringing up this question. But thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Board Member Murilli. Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Thank you, Chair Pearson, and thank you for the presentation on this. I just have a couple of quick questions. How many students, staff, and community members are going to be involved in the different pieces? I know that the good thing about doing individual interviews and focus groups is you get much better detailed information than you would for a large scale survey. But I'm just kind of curious, like scope wise, how many people are we talking about, and at what levels? Are we doing elementary, middle, and high school?
I'm going to not dominate the question and answer because we have such talented folks in our R&I department that I want to highlight. So I'm going to let Bree and Donald first respond, and then if I have anything else to add, I'll add from there.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Gomez-Smith, for your question. So for the interview portal, we're going to have all sixth grade through 12th grade students will participate in those. We will also have, and then the families of those 6th to 8th graders will receive our surveys as well. We're still in the process of deciding on kind of which groups will specifically be encompassed into the focus groups. But we definitely want to make sure that we have a representative sample of various demographic groups and various other groups to make sure we're really encapsulating kind of MMSD and all of the various groups that we have. So again, as Ms. Board Member Vandermeulen mentioned, students with disabilities or individuals with disabilities, et cetera, we want to make sure everybody's voice is represented in that. And then as far as the individual interview portal, it's about over, I want to say, as far as like community members and those things who will be a part of this process, probably over, Bree, would you say about 2,000 to 3,000, like close of those went out to the portal. Now, of course, we don't anticipate that we have a large response rate that all of those individuals come back, but we're hoping to kind of cast our net wide and get as much rich data as we can to get an accurate depiction of MMSD and its equity and inclusion and diversity practices.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that you're casting that wide of a net. I'm actually impressed and hope we get a good response. My last question is just, Donald, this is directly for you. Is there a logic model associated with this process? Just sort of out of curiosity and to give the board sort of an idea of the workings. And I'm asking you about a logic model just because I know you know how to do these through evaluation.
Yes, thank you for your question. So there is no logic model directly tied to the equity audit that Dr. Jackson or his group had created, because the way in which the equity audit is conducted, it's slightly different than a typical evaluation project, where the logic would just kind of flow naturally, and you have your large outcome goals, and then you kind of tie those with practices, and you want to evaluate, hey, did we do what we said and did it work? With the equity audit, it's slightly different in the sense that we're really just kind of looking under the hood of our district and looking at the various practices and things that we have to make sure that we're actually doing what we're saying. So if we have this strategic framework goal, as Dr. Jenkins has mentioned and others have mentioned around Black excellence, are we actually serving and are we actually doing that? And that goes for students, that goes for our staff, and that goes for the broader community context as well.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Jenkins, go ahead.
Yes, I want to say thank you, first of all, to the entire team in this presentation tonight. And I was going to actually respond, but Mr. Danzler really covered the majority of what I was going to say in terms of when I had this discussion with Dr. Jackson and what's going on in our community, in our district. We basically got to the point of when I was coming in and I heard that we said we're a district on a journey of being an anti-racist district, and we're about social justice, in that we have Black excellence out there, and what does it really mean? And we also talked about some of the things that individuals brought in terms of their concerns about the district and how they were experiencing the district. So we wanted to kind of get an assessment from someone who's independent. Dr. Jackson agreed to do this particular project. He's volunteering his time to do this. As we were talking about partnerships, how can we bring partnerships in that can come in and bring some of the talent from off the hill, as I say, from UW into our district in a way that could be meaningful and helping us shape our direction. So as Mr. Dancer said, this was an opportunity to look under the hood, and the things that we were saying, are they really happening? So I thank you, Christine, and I thank Dr. Jackson here tonight in his absence for willing to give up his time and the service project for us.
Could I also add, even though this question wasn't asked, I did want to say I was remiss in not mentioning Beth Vadi, our executive director for R&I, who has kind of loaned out Bree and Donald to do this work, and they check back with her and what have you. But oftentimes they're kind of doing a lot of things independently, and I surely didn't want to make anyone think that they weren't working in the best interest of the whole R&I department.
Thank you, Dr. McGregory. Beth, do you want to say some words, or you came on camera?
Just say that I'm excited about this work, and I think it shows our dedication to working with UW-Madison and continuing that partnership. So I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments board members would like to make? Okay, great. Moving on to our last item, the policy updates for field trips.
Good evening, everyone. So for the field trip policy, I think, is this the second or third look? I can't remember. But bringing it back at the pleasure of the board, I did make a couple additional changes after meeting with board member Gomez Schmidt and board vice president Castro. I was asked to add back in some of the procedure. So I attempted to do that in a way that seemed most natural. And then I was asked about sort of placement of the forms and how people would know that they needed to go to the form. So I did place a statement at the bottom of the policy letting staff know exactly where they needed to go if they were reviewing the policy in anticipation of a field trip, where they would could find all the most updated information about the whole field trip process. That actual website is maintained by the chief of schools office, and specifically by Roxanne Amundson. So, it's important that everyone knows where they can find that information so that we're not repeating information on multiple websites and then forgetting where we posted it and not updating as necessary to keep it current on all those different pages.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Going once? Okay, board member Gomez Schmidt.
I couldn't help it on the policy. So Sherry, appreciate you with continuing to work with you to update this policy. And I think this is a really important one because we have to I think we're getting closer, right? The forms that we have and the forms that you updated were great in detailing changes that we need to make sure that everybody understands the expectations, whether they are staff, students on these field trips or chaperones. I do think we need to add back in some of the language and not just reference forms in these. The one that I see is still all crossed off with the specific language under supervision and under some of these other things. So I'd like to continue to work with you to sort of figure that out, how we can sort of strike a balance between not having too much procedure in there, but having more than just referencing Form C or Form A like that.
In reference to that, so the reference was put there because there was questions about where the information was moved to, and I was asked to cross-reference it. So in the actual policy, it was not my envisioning that that Form C would just show up on a line by itself. It's actually letting the board know where that information was placed.
Okay. I guess it would be my opinion that we still need to have some of these procedure parts within the policy. Again, I think just having it in the forms that chaperones and staff fill out in order to take students on trips isn't transparent enough and isn't visible enough to the public. And so I think with some of these things like the transportation, the supervision, even the definitions, at the front that you added are really important. And the approval part too. So I just like to offer some more suggestions on those.
So I'll lean on you to give me suggestions for that, because as you know, my thought is I don't want to make a situation where staff is inadvertently coming up with procedures and the procedures contradict procedures that are in the policy. And so if we can think of a way together to do that, where we're not putting staff in a position where they could likely be disciplined for not following a procedure that is in effect a procedure. So if we can come up with something together for that, then that's fine.
Yeah, I think we can do that because we'll keep it high level enough and it will still refer to the forms.
Great, thank you. Board Member Carusi.
First of all, I want to thank Sherry. This policy's made a great progress since the last time we looked at it, and I really appreciate the work you put into it. I do, however, agree with Member Gomez-Schmitz's feelings that we do need to look at including high-level procedure in this policy. First of all, as I look at this, many of the recommendations that came out of the review of the East field trip are now in procedure and not in policy, and I'm not entirely comfortable with that. I think some of what the community wants is policy that shows that we've responded to problems we've had in the past. And so including, such as the cell phones, maybe we need to, if we're going to require that everybody have a district cell phone, maybe that needs to be a policy so the board can be sure that we're funding everybody having a district cell phone. I don't know if we want to go down that route, but that was a recommendation. And it's all in the procedures right now. It's all in the field trip forms. It's not visible and transparent to the public. So that would be my recommendation is just think a little bit more about what in the procedure right now and the forms needs to be captured at a high level in this policy so that everybody knows what the expectations are when they send their child on a field trip in MMSD. I also think that our earlier conversation around policy 5000 is an example of why sometimes you need some procedure in policies. There is some practice that does need to have board input, I think. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Carusi. Board Member or Vice President Castro.
Thank you. My perspective is I think that with regard to this, we definitely need to have strongly suggested procedure, but need to have a policy that staff can work with and is not overly prescriptive, and really emphasize professional development in terms of abiding by mandatory reporting, in terms of being able to implement policy. So that's my comment for now.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen.
Yes, Sherry, this is a great update. Please don't get me wrong. I do, however, agree with both Chris Carusi and Chris Gomez-Schmidt in that we need policy in there and we need procedure in there. I understand you wanting to be flexible and that is laudable. However, I think in this narrow circumstance, parents are going to be worried on having their kids on field trips for the next couple of years. I think we could really do a service if we included that high level policy. I'm not talking about a basic explanation. I'm talking a high level. And I think that is necessary just to provide transparency, trust, even though the board was unfortunately broken in this case by people who we don't know. But the problem, or cannot set. The problem being is very simple. We need to be as blatantly transparent on this issue as humanly possible. Because people are waiting to see, and we need to get that trust back. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Board Member Carusi.
Yeah, just one more suggestion. Before we vote on this policy, I think it might be valuable to actually run the policy and the forms past people who will use them. I'm thinking specifically coaches who take students on overnight field trips regularly to get some feedback about how well this is actually going to work in practice. I agree with you, Sherry, that we don't want to create a policy that's going to be unwieldy for the people who have to use it. And at the same time, we want to achieve a balance of communicating to families and to everybody in MMSD what the expectations are on field trips. So I would really love to get some feedback from people who will have to implement and use the policy on a regular basis, who take kids on overnight trips, and see what they think about implementing it. And, if it's going to make it harder.
Actually, that was already done. It was a cross section led by actually Roxanne Atmanson, who is an administrative assistant. So I vetted it with the people who use it the most, including athletics, because this will cover athletics as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? No. Okay, going once, twice. Okay. Thank you, Sherry, for that update. And I will actually entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
We did not apply that.
Okay. And then all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I saw your hands. So yeah, 7-0. We're adjourned, y'all. Have a good night.